All right. Good afternoon, good morning. Welcome to the Dual Use Tech Summit. My name is Vishal Amin. I'm the General Manager of Security Solutions over at Microsoft and also a proud member of the America's Future Series. Today, joining me are Simeon from Case 7 and Eric from Haiku. We'll be talking a little bit about the intersection of national security, cybersecurity, and gaming. I think it's a really cool topic. Thank you both for being here today. You know, I'm casual today. I think when you talk about gaming, we are joking about it earlier. I can't be wearing a tie. You know, I should probably have my Xbox controller in front of me, and we should probably just be talking about, what level we're jumping on next and those types of things. But before we jump straight into the gaming piece, I know I really wanted this to be a casual conversation between the two of us. I know Colonel Kern wasn't able to join us today, but I do have some of his thoughts with us to share with our audience today. Let me kick it over to you. I'd love for you to introduce yourself first, Simeon, and tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe your background, and then we'll throw it over to Eric.
Yeah, hi everyone. So nice to be joining these two gentlemen today. My name is Simeon Kakpovi. In my day job, I'm actually a threat intelligence analyst at Microsoft. So colloquially, my job is to track the biggest, baddest hackers in the world. So I spend a lot of time looking at adversaries and how they behave and how we can figure out how to stop them and help protect customers. And I'm also the president of the KC7 Foundation, which is a nonprofit that is actually training the next generation of diverse talent how to do the same thing, how to enjoy blue teaming, how to enjoy not just hacking things, but figuring out how to stop the bad guys and actually making that fun. And so we have a very different outlook on, how do you get people skills, which I think, Eric shares similar, we do it in slightly different ways, but we share a lot of the same philosophy. In my background, I didn't actually want to get into cyber growing up. I wanted to be a doctor. And I actually got into cybersecurity because of a game that I played. And essentially it was a competition which I got to see. I got to look at the real intrusion data and see how it will catch the bad guys, right? And sometimes we talk about cyber. We all talk about cybersecurity, but it's somewhat rare to actually see what it's like. Mm-hmm. And once you're in that environment where you can see what it's like, you can get your hands on it like a game. Yeah, you're like, wow, this is something that I can do, and this is something that I can see myself enjoying. Mm-hmm. And so, our goal at the KC Foundation is to get people that experience of getting them to that point of like, hey, I really enjoy this, mm-hmm. and I want to do more of this. Because I think when we get people wanting to do it and enjoying it, I think people will find ways to innovate. People will continue bringing others into the industry.
That's awesome. Love it. No, thanks for sharing that. Eric?
Absolutely, yeah. Simeon, you and I talked about this earlier about how games create diversity. So my background was more similar to yours, Vishal. Active duty, I was an officer in the SEAL teams. I got out, I formed a defense contracting company and sold that. And we hired hundreds of cybersecurity people over the years. And I kept running into the problem is they didn't have the hands-on skills I needed. I couldn't tell from their degree and for the most part their certs whether or not they actually had the ability to do, what the hands-on work is. And this because this is what you do on a daily basis. It's all about the hands-on work. Your degree is almost irrelevant. When I hire a cybersecurity person, I don't even look at their degree anymore. I actually really don't care. And so when we started looking at how we were going to train differently, I started looking at what was out there, things that weren't out there 10 years ago. So you got Hack the Box, you've got Try Hack Me, you've got cyber ranges that are, now available at a consumer-based price. That's great. They didn't exist before. But I thought we're still not solving this gap. And there's a gap, one, in the number of people who are actually getting into cybersecurity. There's a gap for the employers of being able to hire people where employers are still looking for, 2 to 3 years of experience because we can't tell from their degrees and from their certs whether or not they can do the job. So I just want to have the experience. And and we looked at Hack the Box, we looked at Try Hack Me, and we thought we're still not teaching as well as we could. And so we decided to go in the area the same way you did, Simeon, about using video games. Yeah. And the reason we used video games was because I've played, since Pong came out in the 70s, and as my kids have grown to adulthood, I've played, video games with them. And I've always been fascinated with why they teach you, right? Because they do teach you. And so we spent a lot of time studying exactly, I know that they teach you, but how do they teach you? And so Jane McGonigal wrote a great book, Reality is Broken, where she talks about a good video game getting your brain into a flow state. McKinsey did a study that shows when your brain's in the flow state, you're 500% more likely to learn. So we created our video games. And so we teach actual hands-on cybersecurity skills. We document them all on the back end. That's kind of the nice thing about having a game engine, is that unlike a cyber range, you can track everything that happens in that game engine, which is from an employer standpoint, look at that and go, well, I actually want to know what my hands-on skills of my people are, aside from their cert and their, course they went to. I want to be able to look at that. So that's what we do now is we build our video games. I've got literally over 100 anecdotes from people that say, I've never been able to learn cybersecurity before until your products, which ties back in the diversity aspect you said, is that if we can train people in a way that resonates with their learning style, we're going to get a lot more qualified people in the industry.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is one of the coolest things that I just heard from both of you was you both came from different backgrounds.
Mhm.
You thought about cyber in a different way.
Right.
And one of the questions I was going to ask later, but I don't think I even have to ask it. Do you even need a degree to get into this industry? Right? Many of us have formal schooling.
Sure.
A lot of us rely on the schooling from everything from an HBCU. That I know, Simeon, you spend a lot of time empowering students in those forums. And Eric, from the military standpoint, we do a lot of education and skilling, but do you even need some of these formal institutions anymore to get into cyber? And I think you answered the question, really, no, but they serve as a great place to find that raw talent.
Right.
I want to jump right into the forum itself, right? Dual use. This was a very controversial topic. When we brought gaming, cybersecurity, national security to the topic of this forum, I actually ventured out to a couple venture capitalist firms, a couple organizations, internally to Microsoft, externally to gaming companies. As a national security professional, like both of you, I reached out into the national security space. And I found it very interesting that there wasn't many investments, conversations in the private sector area of dual use cyber when it came to gaming.
Yeah.
Actually, there was a statement that was given to me that said, Vishal, that's a really interesting topic that you want to put together. And I know Colonel Kern had some strong opinions on this as well. But the statement I got was, Vishal, gaming's not really, what you're talking about is not dual use.
Yeah.
I mean, what are your reactions to that? Eric?
Yeah, it's fun. So we're venture funded. The Veteran Fund is one of our investors, along with Chris Kelly. Veteran Fund specifically invests in dual use technology, but the use of games for dual use, I agree with you. I've talked to a number of VCs that say, well, we're a game-oriented VC, but they want different metrics. They want to know how many consumers you have and what kind of different venues you're marketing your game on, which isn't what our game is for, right? Of the 200, 300 million gamers, there's only a small subset of them who want to play a video game, but of the people who are trying to get into cybersecurity, there's a large portion of them who can use a video game. So the metrics that would work for a VC to invest in a gaming company don't really work. The metrics for a VC that want to, invest in an ed tech company, it's a little bit closer, but it's still not quite there. I think it's funny. I mean, the idea that dual use does not apply to gaming. I mean, we know that we do gaming in the military, right? We got flight simulators, we've got, war games. It's actually called war games. And then in the civilian world, we've got actual games. So it's funny, people say, but they have to be separate. I disagree completely.
I mean, Eric, I'm going to dig into it a little bit though. Yeah. We do have gaming in the military.
We do.
When I was in the Hornet community, we used to go into the simulator and we used to put enemy aircraft down there. When we look at other parts of the industry, we whiteboard things. That's a form of gaming.
Yep.
And we put things into perspective where we put situations into a platform and we act against them. But is that gaming or is that gamification?
That's a good point. I've actually, did you want to address this or?
No, you can go first.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I've actually had this conversation with people and I had to put a lot of thought into this when people say, oh, so you gamify things. And I said, no, we create game-based training. And they said, well, what's the difference? I said, well, gamification is if you put a game-like feature, like a leaderboard or a badge or something like that onto some existing training, whether that's PowerPoint, a video, a cyber range, something. But the way in which you learn is still the video, the PowerPoint, the cyber range. You didn't change the way you're training people. When you use the actual game and you engage the user in the game, and the game itself has the effect of training the person, now you're changing the training dynamic. You're not just using a gamification feature to try to get them to do the old traditional training. And I think that's why I actually draw the line between that. And I think that's where you see people that are doing gamification things to an existing training. And they say, well, we're getting okay results of it from it. And I look at that and go, well, you didn't actually create a game.
Yeah. I think this is a really interesting topic for cyber in particular, because cyber itself is already a game, right? You think about a game, you have an adversary, you have a victim, right? At the end of the day, when we're doing cyber, someone's going to win. If the adversary compromises your organization, if they steal your data, they won. If the adversary ransoms your organization, they won. And so day to day as a defender, you're trying to figure out how you beat the adversary. And sometimes I don't think that really rings true to people, right? Like people don't quite understand that, like that's what you're doing as a defender every single day. And so if you can put someone in the environment where there's stakes, where they're like, okay, well, I have to find the other person, or I have to find the adversary somehow. I have to win in some way. Then I think there's some skin in the game for them, right? I think there's an innate desire to win. And, we talked about, effective training is about getting people to come back and wanting to play more and wanting to invest in those skills. And I think when people want to defeat the adversary, when people want to play the game to win, you can get them really motivated to come back. And we've had a lot of success in that way of creating captivating stories about organizations that people want to protect. And you get people coming back over and over again because they're like, hey, I want to defeat the adversary. I want to win. I want to win the game.
I wasn't gonna, I just thought of something, and we didn't discuss this. We're talking about wanting to win. And when you look at the principles of things like zero trust, right? And we look at assume compromise or assume breach, right? We're assuming we've already lost. So when you look at individuals investing into this industry and learning the platform, knowing that they're going to lose going in it, how do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them in there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think sometimes with zero trust, there's a lot of different battles, right? But at the end of the day, you don't want to win just a battle, you want to win the war, right? And so, winning the battle is, you might lose the battle, the adversary might compromise a host or might compromise a few things, but if you can find them before they do, the ultimate worst, right? That's still winning the war at the end of the day, right? That's winning in the long run. If you can evict the adversary, right, that's still a victory for you. If you can stop them before they ransom your organization, if you can stop them, if you find they have access, but you can stop them before they exfiltrate the data, that's still a win for you. Because at the end of the day, adversaries invest a lot of time, energy, and money into compromising an organization, right? Like for them, it's not cheap, right? They may have invested, a couple $1 million or a couple months just trying to get that initial foothold. And for you to go and to find that foothold, even if they've already gotten in, that hurts them, right? That puts them back, 10, 12 months back. And at the end of the day, that's still a victory for you. And I think teaching people to look at it a different way, right, I think really helps them get into it because they say, hey, like as defenders, we can actually win. And I think, some of that positive thinking really helps drive, can really help drive how we play defense. And protect the things that we care about.
I like where you're going with that. And there are games that are designed, you are going to lose, the zombie apocalypse games, right? I mean, you're fighting waves of zombies. There's no way you win this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're going to die eventually. It goes all the way back to Space Invaders. You're eventually going to die. But so I don't think necessarily the fact that that you're going to lose would make it unappealing for somebody.
Right.
You just have to tailor the game so that the player understands the rules of the game and they don't feel like they were treated unfairly.
So let's take a step back. We kind of went into gaming, went into, why people play. I want to tie this back to national security. I mean, a lot of these topics that we're talking about today during this summit and this forum are how are what we're doing affecting national security? One of the conversations I had with Colonel Kern and with some of the folks within the Air Force in the national security space was over the last 10 years, national security has been a very tangible, physical, monetarily driven through the defense industry and the defense base action, right? When we look at national security pieces on a chessboard, especially if you look at the war in Ukraine right now, or the conflict, in that whole region, in the European region, you look at the defense industrial base trying to arm up things like tanks, weapon systems, right, aircraft, munitions, and all of these things contribute to what I remember in the service as maneuver warfare. You were the maneuver element of this operation, this task force. So when I look at the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, Air Base, Sea Base, when I look at supporting national security efforts, I'm tying it to a tangible human, putting boots on the ground with an armament feature on them and advancing forward. How, and without gaming, talk to me about where your thoughts are of where cyber is now in that national security sphere to actually do work to progress democracy, to progress doing good, around the world. And what I mean by that, I guess, if I simplify this question is cyber now a maneuver warfare element, right? What are your thoughts on cyber and national security and where that is now compared to where we were 10 years ago?
Yeah, so it's certainly a force enabler, right? I actually wrote a blog, I think 15 years ago, about how is a Navy SEAL platoon like a piece of malware. It's a force enabler, right? So that I think the idea that you're going to launch a cyber attack and completely defeat a country still isn't a reality, because you have to have the kinetic and the end of the at the end of the day, you have to take land, right? Russia's not just launching cyber attacks against Ukraine and then just sitting there going, hey, we shut down their traffic lights. Great. We now own Ukraine. Well, no, they've got to actually take land, and because we have physical human beings that are there. Now, that being said, it's a huge force enabler as we, put more and more things online, and, we actually increase the attack surface. To come back to your other question, where are we at? I hate to say this, but I feel like we're still figuring it out. I look at the Army, for example, and I mean, it takes about $1 million to take somebody from high school recruit to cyber SMA. 22% attrition rate. This is one of the issues we're trying to specifically address, but we could do a lot better than that. I mean, I kind of look at, like, your F-18 training or SEAL training or something like that, or probably the DART training you guys go through at Microsoft is, I don't think it's been refined to the point where we're creating the best in the world by using better training that exists somewhere else. I think we're still kind of fumbling around with traditional training methods, because none of the old school folks in the military understand what it is we're trying to train. I mean, like, this is right up your alley. What do you think, Simeon?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you said, right, cyber is enabler, right? And especially like in today's age, having more information is a key competitive advantage, especially in a wartime environment, right? Like knowing where your adversary is, knowing where your adversary is going to go. I think there's been a lot of, public reports written by various companies about, how within the Russia-Ukraine war, right, Russia has been using cyber as a competitive advantage, right? If you understand, where the opponent is, if you can, shut down power before you move in, all these little things you can do give you a huge advantage in the long run, which is why we see adversaries investing in their cyber capabilities, right? They're not doing it for fun. They're doing it because they get returns on that. In order to protect ourselves, it means that we need to defend our critical infrastructure, right? Defend, right? If they're so motivated to compromise certain institutions, we have to be able to defend those institutions. And we don't defend institutions just by, throwing more money at the problem or simply by buying better tools. We defend institutions by making sure that the people who are doing the work, the analysts, right, who are looking for that needle in a stack of needles, are motivated to win, right, are motivated and have the skills and desire to think about innovative ways of solving the problem. Because again, at the end of the day, right, the adversary is innovative. Like you talk about some of the hackers on the other side from these nation states, right? They're not just doing the same thing over and over again. They're sitting there thinking, how can I do something different today that hasn't been done before, that's never been seen, right? And so you think about, as a defender, if you're doing the same thing that's always been done, if you're not thinking creatively about how the the opponent or how the attacker might do something different, well, you're not going to win, right? Because you're never going to see what they're doing until it's too late.
So let me ask you, Simeon, I'll ask you this first. I look at where cybersecurity is now. I think it's very clear that it is an enabler. It's a differentiator. I mean, there was that famous article that came out during the Ukrainian conflict when the tanks rolled in. So did Microsoft. Remember that article from the New York Times? There's a lot of interconnectivity between national security, democracy forward initiatives, and cybersecurity. Now, if I take that into the context of use cases and utilizing gaming to contribute to evangelizing cyber more in the national security space, I look at the Air Force Air Wings in San Antonio. I look at US Cybercom. I look at Marforce Cyber. I look at the cyber initiatives at DHS, at the VA, other places. What use cases do you see for gaming within those organizations to defend against nation state actors? And I've got this sneaking suspicion it's going to revolve around education for you.
Yeah. Two things. One, it's about identifying people who can be part of your cybersecurity workforce that you otherwise might have missed, right? You don't want to, you may have people in your organizations who would be, the best cybersecurity, the best defenders in your organization.
Let me ask you real quick. I'm going to interrupt.
Yeah.
That one question. I'm just going to, most jobs that I see right now require 10, 15, 7 years of cyber experience. Do you just go and say, let's eliminate those and have someone that understands how people think, pull those people in, and then train them a different way?
Well, I think there's room for like having more senior analysts to guide and mentor those that are coming in the industry, but at the end of the day, right, at KC7, the philosophy we always preach is it's not about the tools, it's about the mindset, like you said, right? It's about having those critical thinking skills and about, given any environment and any data set and any tool set, being able to figure out how you use that to find what the adversary is. And we've had really cool use cases of people who, haven't done cyber before, and in a very short amount of time have really been able to understand it at a pretty high level that, normally would take, years for others to get. A really cool use case, a really cool example that I always bring up was, we're at Sans Cyber last year, and there was, and we presented KC7 to a room of a couple hundred people who wanted to get into cyber, who were just thinking about into cyber. And one gentleman, he was a watch repairman, had never worked in IT, had never worked in cybersecurity. And he found our game. He said, hey, I'll just play this for fun, for entertainment. And he started playing it. And he spent hundreds of hours in KC7 over the next 8 months.
Love it.
Right? Someone who never worked in IT, never worked in cybersecurity. And today, almost a year later, he's really good at doing cybersecurity analysis, right? People often will mistake him for someone who's been working in the industry for 5, 10 years, right? Why? Because he figured out that, hey, this is something I really enjoy, right? He's able to dig into the data and really play a game that simulates doing the real thing. And he enjoys it so much that he's extremely persistent in it and wants to get better, right? Now, if you can take an instance like that, and you can multiply it by 100, by 1,000, right? You can identify people at scale who are passionate about doing the job and who want to get better, right? And you can give them the right skills by having them spend a lot of time doing it, right? You can substantially increase the security posture of organizations because you have a workforce that is not just skilled, but also motivated to win. And I think that makes a huge impact in that.
I think that outcome,
organizations.
Yeah, the outcome of skilling and motivating them to win. I mean, Eric, I'm interested in your thoughts. You've been working with talking to a lot of our Department of Defense agencies.
Yep.
I mean, we'll cover some of the stuff that, I know you've talked to in organizations that I've been part of recently, but outside of skilling, right? I can use this same use case for transitioning veterans or students getting out of school, right? Outside of skilling, platforms like Haiku, what is their, what's their capability outside of just that, right? Especially when we talk about men and women that serve our nation in and out of uniform.
Could I verify what?
Yeah, please do.
Because you and I were kind of talking about this too. I agree with you. The ability, one of the beauty of games is games cross every demographic.
Yeah.
Everybody plays games. They may not play video games, although
That's a fair point,
a lot
yeah.
of people do, but everybody plays a game, whether it's Sudoku or something. We're wired as that as humans. And if you can use games to expose people who otherwise wouldn't think about getting into cybersecurity and saying, it's not only is it hard, I'm actually really kind of enjoying this. And that was the example that I gave you. We had 30 students from Grossmont College. They played our game. And 5 of them after switched majors from whatever it was they before to cybersecurity. And 3 of those 5 are women. The statistic about women is important because only 24% of cybersecurity professionals are women.
Yeah.
And so what I've found, and whenever we run a CTF using our product, women usually win. Not because we bias the CTF towards them. I don't even know how you do that, right? But because I'm convinced, once you can teach people a difficult skill in a way that works with the way their brain works,
Yeah.
you can get them to be good at something, and so good that they're better than people that naturally gravitate towards it. You know, the kid that takes apart a transistor radio and puts it back together again, it's no problem teaching him cybersecurity. You give him a Linux box and he'll teach himself. But it's the person who looks at stick him in front of a Kali Linux box and a command line, and you tell them to go, and they're like, I'm out. You know, I don't code, I don't do math. That's the person, if you can bring them in and show them, they're going to bring a whole bunch of other skills that the kid who took apart the transistor radio can't bring, because they have a different way of looking at things. And that's really important, I think, as you're both a threat hunter and a defender as well, because you're exactly right. This is one thing I don't think AI has caught up to yet, is the ability of human beings to change the way in which they approach something in extremely subtle ways to be able to get the person to open that phishing email. Right.
Yeah.
And the person who's reading the phishing email to be able to determine, I'm not going to open that because I can tell it's a phishing email. This is something I don't think AI has even, approached yet.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I don't think I answered your question.
And
No.
I'm glad you brought up the topic of diversity, because that's something that's, personally important to me and important to my organization as well. I think diversity does have a huge part to play when it comes to national security, right? If we're thinking about defending the nation, we have to think about bringing everyone to the table,
Right.
and making sure that everyone has equal access and equal opportunity to, participate, especially in the cybersecurity workforce. I think, there's been a lot of conversation recently, right? The Office of National Cyber Director about, how cybersecurity, how diversity plays into the security of our nation. So like you said, how do you give people who otherwise wouldn't have the chance or would even think, hey, cyber might be for me, the chance to experience it, right? Because then you get all people from all different walks of life who think in different ways coming to the table and helping, contributing to the mission. And I think that's a huge plus for our country and for our security.
I'd say it's something I haven't seen outside of gaming, and I'm biased, obviously. This is all I do now is I would create. But I mean, when you try to force the issue and say, well, we're gonna only recruit from this group. Well, okay, you're gonna have some people from that group who are good at it and some aren't, because you're still trying to teach them. You still stick them in a cyber range and you let them sink or swim. And you're gonna have people that can sink and people that can swim. But if you, again, change the way in which you appeal to people to get them to learn the way that their brain works, boom, you open up so many doors.
Yeah. And not just about how they learn, but also it's the context in which they learn is important, right?
Yes.
If you develop training that that isn't socially applies socially to a lot of people, right? That only applies to a certain demographic, right? They're going to come into it. They're going to look at the training and be like, well, clearly, like that is not me up there.
That's exactly
clearly that has nothing to do with me, and so I don't want to stay here, right? But if you can add context to your training, that someone walks in and said, this was made for me, I belong here, that makes such a huge impact, right? They already see themselves, and how people see themselves and can perceive themselves, I think makes a huge difference in them wanting to stick around, and them feeling like they belong and they are valued within the industry, which is so important.
It's an interesting conversation, and we deviate off the question, but that's fine, right? I think the question really goes back to, and I can tie it back in, diversity is really a key portion of gaming, and it's always been a key portion of gaming. You mentioned we mentioned the difference between gamification and gaming in the Department of Defense industry, and it's always been there. If you look at diversity, how have we invested in diversity through gaming? Well, we've brought gaming into the use cases
Yeah.
rather than brought the use cases to gaming, right? When I looked at the Hornet community, we brought gaming to the training platform.
Mhm.
When you looked at SEAL training, you brought use cases and training to buds.
Mhm.
When you look at training or operating in any sense so that you can mitigate real-time loss or fuel or budget, you brought gaming into those environments,
Mhm.
which organically diversifies how we do something. I wrote something down here. What I was going to lean into was we've had some recent conversations on the importance of gaming for the current operators within the Department of Defense and National Security space. One of the things that you just shared with me, both of you just shared with me, is teaching them the right languages to query off of, doing all those big things. What is your interpretation of how AI is going to change that? Right now, I see technologies coming into the space that are making it, number one, easier for folks to be threat hunters and to query and to do that work of defenders. But Eric, I'll be honest with you, it's mitigating their ability and their need to actually jump into a platform and learn the basics.
Yeah.
Right. So in one way, it is encouraging diversity. In
Right.
another way, it's bypassing basic blocking and tackling that maybe we're talking about.
It's interesting. So my last company, we got back into cybersecurity in 2007. And that was before, the reason we did this really quick anecdote, well, I was sitting in a panel for the Navy, and there were a bunch of admirals on there, and they gave the tenets by which they're going to network enable the Navy, and one of them was not security, and I asked the question, why isn't security on there? And this, well, I guarantee it's going to be on there next time. And it made me realize, and this is paralleled with IoT, is as you're putting everything onto a common platform, in the military in particular, where you're going away from, all these ridiculously obscure platforms like MUMPs and everything else we have in there, right?
Yes.
Where it required a nation state actor to be able to go in there and understand and maybe have one person who's specialized in each one of those things. Once you put everything on one protocol, IP, and then once you have, basically a common, a common platform, this is where script kiddies came out. And I see the AI as the next evolution to where that is, well, now you don't even have to be a script kiddie. You can actually have an AI write a script for you.
Yeah.
But I agree with you 100% is that's the reason we teach it a command prompt in our game. Because most people given a GUI can point and click and fake it until they make it.
Yeah.
But if you ask them at the end, how did you get there? And they go, I don't know, I just kept clicking. You didn't really teach anything. But if you can teach them the basics of how to work at a command prompt, you don't really forget what you typed in a command prompt, right? You have to actually know what you're doing. And so I think we're going to see the same thing we saw with the script kiddies, a bunch of people who really aren't that well qualified, but the true nation state actors, which includes our nation state actors, right? They're going to have the basics. I mean, solid basics.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And that, we spent a lot of time thinking about our KC7 because everyone always talks about the basics, the fundamentals. But what really are the fundamentals? From our perspective, right? And our game, in our game, right? We give you realistic cybersecurity data. You have to use, KQL, a query language, to query it. So you're actually solving an intrusion in real data. But people are done, right? And they're like, oh, well, I got all these KQL skills. Like, what can I do with this? And I'm like, actually, the fundamentals that you got are not the technical querying skills. Yes, you learn how to query data, right? You learn all the syntax. But that's not actually what we're trying to teach you. What we're actually trying to teach you is how you think about an intrusion, right? So as opposed to thinking about the basics as being like the very technical skills that you have to hands-on do, we think about the basics instead as how you think critically about the issue at hand, right? How do you think about the intrusion? Given the situation that you're in, how do you think about where you're going next? Because the truth of the matter is, like when you're solving an intrusion, you're going to have different skill sets no matter where you are. It's the same thing for adversaries. When an adversary gets inside like a victim system, the technology is whatever the victim has, right? They don't get in there and they're like, oh, well, this victim has this specific technology. I don't know anything about that. Like, I'm out of here, right?
Right.
They're like, well, I'm going to figure out how to do that very specific thing so I can leverage it within my intrusion. They work with what they have. And I think that's the same mentality we have to come with from the defensive perspective of, teach someone how to fish, teach them how to think about how intrusions work and get comfortable with that, so that no matter what tools that they're thrown, they're like, you know what, I'm comfortable because I understand the big picture of how everything works. And I can do some Googling. I can use AI to write the query for me. I can use AI to write the script for me. So I can still function in this environment. And that's really a mindset that we've taken when we're teaching not just people at the continuing education level, but in K through 12, whenever we're doing events there, right? Because at the end of the day, you want to teach students how to think critically, because those skills apply not just to cyber, but to a lot of other discipline. It's really worked because people, they'll do KQL and then you throw them into Splunk, or you throw them to, command line, or you throw them to any other thing. And they're like, hey, like I haven't seen this before, but the principles are the same and I can still function, and I can use AI to, do those nitty gritty things for me, and nothing's really changed from a high level.
Let me ask you, Simeon, you spoke about thinking critically, and that's what you're looking for.
Yeah.
If you were to look at the demographic of individuals today that are non-cyber people, maybe aren't in university, maybe you're in high school playing sports, people that are doing trade work and other things. From what you've seen through KC7, what's your ideal demographic of threat hunter? Where do you pull them from right now? Where would you ideally go look for these folks?
I think they're everywhere. You don't really know, right? Because people have those critical thinking skills in different facets of their life. You just have to figure out how to pinpoint it.
That's great.
Right. And usually, it's hard to like identify who's going to be good at it until they're kind of in the moment, right? We've done so many events where you'll come in and you'll try to predict who's going to be good at threat hunting before the event happens. And almost every single time we're wrong, right? Almost every single time it's someone that was like quiet in the corner who didn't really say much. And then all of a sudden you're looking at the leaderboard for who's actually performing, who's actually good at it. And it was the person who may not have been good minute 1, minute 2, minute 3, but over time, it's the person who was more persistent. It was like, hey, like, I understand this. I'm willing to do this. I enjoy the way this works. So I'm willing to invest time in it. And we've had people from all different ages, right? We've had people who are younger, people who are older, people who are in high school have been good at it, people from all different genders, right? People from all different, backgrounds, social
and investing in different places.
Yeah. And so I think at the end of the day, it's hard to predict, but it's about giving everyone an opportunity to get their hands on it. And once they do get their hands on it, you'll find people from that you would never have expected to be really good at it. And at the end of the day, I think that's what, right? That's the whole point of diversity, right? Is about giving everyone a fair shot. Because when you give everyone a fair shot, right, you'll be surprised at what positive outcomes that you couldn't even have imagined will come out of it.
Eric, let's talk about Haiku specifically. You've built this platform. I mean, I was on a meeting with you recently where we're talking with folks that I really see as some of the most talented defenders in the industry. But the issue that we were trying to solve was it's hard for me to maintain and retain these individuals and track their skills and if they're actually doing it. In your experience in longevity with Haiku specifically, the same conversation you were having with that team, right? You're having with our national security individuals. And that same conversation is how do I maintain, train, track, and retain this talent? When I look at that, I look at a conversation like that, not as how do we train these people, but how do we, that I said retain a couple times, how do we retain them? Do you feel that gaming will change the way we retain talent in the national security arena when it comes to cyber? And how do you do that and build off of what you're doing with Haiku?
Absolutely. One of our Fortune 500 customers, he actually, in the first meeting we had with him, he said, and he was probably in his mid-40s, he goes, I don't play video games, but my cybersecurity people said video games are their golf. It's not whether they play video games, it's what games do they play and how often do they play them. And so I think as we're trying to, in the national security industry, trying to both attract and then retain these people, I think you need to take the next step beyond cyber ranges. I think cyber ranges started about 15 years ago, and
Right.
they're better than they, before cyber ranges, you didn't have any really ubiquitous and cost-effective way to test your hands-on skills. But they really just test your hands-on skills. If you go into not to pick on Hack the Box, but you go to a Hack the Box SQL injection range, it's going to test if you know SQL injection, because you have to know SQL injection to get root, cut, paste the flag. But if you want to learn it, you read their PDF or watch their video or do your own research online. So we didn't change the way we're teaching people. And so that was exactly what we tried to do, is we tried to use games to do that.
Right.
There are a number of additional benefits we found as we did that. We built everything in ours in the Unity game engine, but you could use Unreal or something else. These game engines are designed to track when your level 12 elf walks 5 feet and opens a treasure chest, right? Because they're trying to monetize all that. And so we repurposed that to be able to track how many times somebody types ifconfig successfully on a different computer using the arguments correctly, right? I haven't seen a cyber range that does that. It's quite possible that there are cyber ranges that do that, but it requires a relatively complex interface between the user and then the backend range. We actually started our product with that. We had a cloud-based backend and then a HTML5 and React interface. And we found out we couldn't control the user experience enough and track enough of what we're trying to do. So we built everything into a Unity game engine, so we can track everything they do. And this is the group that you're talking about. This is where they got really excited, and they said, right now we have the ability to send people to courses, which is it parallels the Army, right? The Army sends people off to an in-person course, and they come back, and all they know is they went to the course and they got their completion or not. They don't, I mean, I actually had a
Certification based.
a customer from the DHS said, I don't know if they're any better at their job or not. I do know that they went to the course and it cost me a lot of money, but other than that, I don't know if they're any better at their job. And so one of the things we use the game engine for is to track everything they're doing. So, that the unit leaders, the, employers or the educators can actually look and see what their people are doing. And there's another benefit to that too, is there's a testing bias. And this is just the way learning is done, right? When you give somebody a test, you're testing two things. One is their ability to regurgitate the amount of information you gave them within a set period of time. And two is how good are they at taking tests?
Yeah.
And if you're really good at taking tests, you don't have to study the material as much. If you are terrible at taking tests,
Right.
you could know the material far better than the guy next to you or the girl next to you, but you do terrible on the test. And so people don't think you're very good at it. So we get rid of all that bias. We don't test. We literally just measure everything you're doing in the game, and then we can give the employers an idea of.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Right. The testing bias is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, a little known fact, I failed out of flight school 3 times. I was horrible. I mean, granted, I may have just been a bad person in my role, but I felt I was just really bad under the pressure cooker of someone over my shoulder, just marking everything down.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got into the squadron when all that was gone, where we just started going. And that's really crazy that you say that, because I was talking about retention. So much easier to retain people, whether it's in an environment, like a range, or within a service and organization, if you can get rid of that bias, right? I mean, we were talking about cyber ranges earlier, and I see so many cyber ranges, even in my current role professionally, and the things I do personally, that come out and say, organizations use our range to do this. They come and test their services and products here. This is where they put their software. This is where we put some of the latest threats that we've seen and their TTPs. They go in there, they use it, and they come out. Well, what you're saying is, if you just take out that bias,
Right.
It's not a range, it's a game.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You're just playing the game, and you're going through the game, and you aren't sitting here going, I really got to do this. This is a lot of stress. I mean, my oldest daughter, she's brilliant, but she's struggling with the SATs because she isn't able to translate that brilliance into taking the test.
All right. Well, this has been really good. We have a couple minutes left. Before we close out with your final thoughts, I have a couple questions for you. I'm going to put you both in a hot seat.
Yeah.
You guys ready?
Yeah, let's do
I got a couple questions. I'm gonna list them out. All right. Start easy. We're gonna lighten things up, and then we'll come back to it. Number 1, Simeon, you can go first. What song is playing in your head when you're hunting for nation state bad actors in your game?
What song is playing in my head?
Now, first song that comes to mind.
Probably All I Do Is Win, DJ Khaled.
Eric, do you have any music playing in your head while you're in the environment?
I'm going to go way older school than Simeon. I'm probably going back to some Bee Gees songs from Saturday Night Fever soundtrack.
I love that. Is hacking good or bad? Eric?
Not enough information, right?
That's a good feedback for me. You know, I think one of the reasons I asked that question is there's I think Chris Roberts, for example, he's an advocate in the cyber community, and he always says hackers are good people. And we say hack for good all the time. I want to bypass that question for Simeon, that way I don't get the same answer. I'm gonna ask Eric this one first. Xbox or PlayStation?
So I've been an Xbox guy forever, but I got PlayStation because they didn't have Baldur's Gate 3 on the Xbox. Literally the only reason I got that PlayStation.
Simeon?
Well, I get a free Xbox subscription because I work for Microsoft. So
That's
that's
gotta be
it.
Xbox.
But I already had to be fair, I already had an Xbox before that. 'Cause
My next question was to Simeon, to be in cyber, do you need a degree or no degree?
I don't think you need a degree.
Yeah.
I have multiple degrees, but I think I could still do the job if I didn't have them.
Awesome. Favorite book, Simeon?
Favorite book. Let's see. The one that comes to mind was one I read recently, The Right It, about, how do you test ideas. I'm in a huge entrepreneurial spirit about thinking about how do you make something work. So that's a really good one that I really enjoyed.
You, Eric?
I'm gonna go with an author, because there are so many books.
Sure.
Roger Zelazny, he was a 70s, 80s author. He wrote a whole work of fiction. I just always loved his character style of the Ubermensch character.
All right, well, I got two more questions, and we'll turn it back around to what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Eric, I'll give you this one first. I would say this is maybe an oxymoron, your favorite nation state actor,
Oh, okay.
bad actor,
Oh, bad actor.
to maybe hunt against,
I
to defend
feel like
against.
kind of like asking who your favorite serial killer is. Somebody's gonna
Yeah.
dislike your answer. So I've been extremely impressed by the North Koreans, given that they have very limited resources. Now, to be fair, I recognize before anybody gets upset at that, is that they take all those very limited resources and they put them towards the favorite elite, and they're threat hunters of the favorite elite. But man, they managed to do a lot of work given that they aren't even connected to the rest of the world.
Awesome. That was a really great perspective. Simeon, same question.
Yeah. The most interesting one I've got in the track, one called Crimson Sandstorm or Tortoiseshell, Iranian-based threat actor, was using social media to launch honeypots on folks. I always tell the story, would talk to folks and they would have dated folks for like an entire year without doing anything. So usually when you think about cybersecurity, you think, oh, well, I'll give you malware right away. These guys were super patient, and that was something that we've never seen before.
That's awesome. Well, I think, I'll close it off after both of you, but final thoughts on today in terms of the intersection of gaming, cybersecurity, and national security?
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. I think there's a lot of potential for the future. And what gives me hope is whenever we have this training platform that's supposed to teach the best of the best, right? And then we'll take it and we'll go to a high school and we'll give them the same exact material. And what you find is that even at these early levels, students are excited about it and they're able to do the work, right? And so the idea that, you have to wait till college, till, way past college to do this, I think is a bit outdated, right? I think in order to train the next generation of diverse, cyber defenders, you have to start at the earlier level. And I think we've proven and we've seen that folks at that level are excited about it. They want to get involved and they're able to do the work. So we're super excited about having more of that.
Where do you go find KC7?
KC7cyber.com. It's free online. Anybody can play it. So you can just go on there today. All you need is a laptop and an internet connection. Is what I always say.
Hey, thanks for all the work you do in this community. Eric, final thoughts today on today's talking session.
I think we're going to be talking more and more about this as the years go on. I think there was a reluctance of people to actually include games. That's why you have the kind of the half steps of gamification. But I think as we look more and more at this, I think in about 5 years, people are going to be saying, well, of course we use games. Everybody uses games. It's the best way to train people.
Awesome. And Haiku?
www.haikuinc.io, not .com, .io.
Thank you both for your time, your insights today. I feel like I'm going to go home and try to play a whole bunch of games now. As we close the book today on today's session, I'm reminded, I say this in every session that I'm part of, I'm reminded by words of folks like Travis Manion, where he said, if not me, then who? If we don't do it, someone less willing, less able will have to. And I really want to invest in what both of you gentlemen said today. We have to invest in diversity. We have to look at national security differently. The faces, the personalities, the people, the culture is different now. And gaming is a way for us to shift out of that. And in those 5 words, if not me, then who, I empower everyone watching today and that will watch. Invest in gaming, invest in defending the future. Because if we don't, someone less willing, less able will have to. And I'll close it by saying, today is International Women's Day. So thank you to all the women that do so much, both in uniform, out of uniform, and in the communities around us. So thank you for having us today.